Sleep to Enola Holmes, The Bell That Rang After Death. Chapter 1, The Bell That Rang After Death. The small village of Ashford Hollow was quiet, as it always was. Nestled between the rolling hills of the English countryside, it seemed the very definition of peace, an idyllic picture of rural life. The streets were narrow, the cottages tucked neatly under the shade of towering oak trees, and the air always smelled faintly of wildflowers and earth. There was no grand estate or bustling marketplace to speak of. Life here was simple, almost too simple. It had been an ordinary Thursday when Enola Holmes first arrived, though the locals, as usual, paid her little attention. A young woman traveling alone was not an uncommon sight for the people of Ashford Hollow. But the reason for Enola's arrival was anything but ordinary. She had received a letter from an old acquaintance, a retired vicar who had served in the village church decades ago. The letter spoke of something strange. It had been nearly 2 weeks since the vicar's death, and the villagers were still talking about it. They spoke in hushed tones, fearing the dead could still speak from beyond the grave. The old church bell, which had not rung in over 20 years, had tolled the night of the vicar's passing. Twice. 1 toll would have been expected. 2 was a mystery. It had been enough to stir up the gossip, enough to unsettle the residents of Ashford Hollow. Who would ring the bell twice when the vicar's body was still warm? And why hadn't anyone heard the bell in decades? Enola's curiosity had been piqued. The bell had rung for a reason. Something, or someone, had caused it. And Enola, always eager for a puzzle, knew she would be the one to uncover the truth. Enola arrived at the small, crumbling church at the heart of the village as the sun began to sink low in the sky. The bell tower loomed above the simple stone building, its weathered exterior covered in ivy. It stood silent now, but Enola could feel its weight, the weight of the mystery that hung in the air. The church, like the village, seemed frozen in time. Yet something was wrong, and Enola could feel it deep in her bones. She walked up the stone path to the church doors, her boots clicking sharply against the cobblestones. The doors creaked open, revealing a dusty, dimly lit interior. The pews were worn with age, the wooden beams of the ceiling sagging under the weight of years gone by. The air was thick with the smell of incense and candle wax, the faint remnants of services long since forgotten. The only sound, aside from her footsteps, was the faint rustling of leaves outside in the autumn breeze. At the far end of the church, Enola could just make out the shape of the bell tower. Above it, the large brass bell that had tolled on the night of the vicar's death now hung motionless. Enola moved toward the altar, her sharp eyes scanning the space. There was something odd about the way the church seemed to absorb sound, as if it held secrets in its very walls. As she walked, she noticed the congregation's old pews, empty, untouched by the footfalls of recent worshippers. The vicar had been buried just 2 days prior. Yet, the church already seemed abandoned. It was a quiet place, but the silence felt too heavy here, too unnatural. Enola's eyes narrowed as she reached the altar. In front of her, on the stone slab, lay a thick ledger, its pages yellowed with age, the handwriting faded. A ledger. A place for recording events. The idea of the vicar keeping such a thing was not surprising. But the book before her looked untouched, almost as if it had been placed there for her to find. The vicar had died, but his records were still here, still waiting for someone to read them. A soft voice broke through her thoughts, startling her. You must be Miss Holmes. Enola spun around to see an older woman standing near the entrance of the church, her gray hair tied neatly in a bun. She wore a dark dress, with a white lace collar, and she stood with her hands folded politely in front of her. There was something calm, almost somber about her presence, but Enola couldn't shake the feeling that the woman was more than she appeared. She had the quiet air of someone who knew things she was not ready to share. I am, Enola replied, with a polite but pointed smile. I was sent by the vicar's old friend, Reverend Whitcomb. He mentioned the bell, and I've come to see if I could help uncover the truth. The woman stepped closer, her eyes flicking toward the altar. The bell, she murmured, her voice soft. Yes, many people are still afraid of it. They say it was a warning, a sign of things to come. But they do not know what it means. No one does. Only the vicar, and now, her voice trailed off, and she looked away. Enola felt the weight of her gaze and took a step forward. Who are you? She asked gently, though her voice was sharp with the need to understand. I'm Eleanor Mallow, the woman replied, her voice trembling slightly. I was the vicar's housekeeper, and I've lived in this village all my life. I have seen many things, Miss Holmes. Some things I wish I could forget. Others I hope someone will finally uncover. Enola studied her, sensing a depth to her words that went beyond the ordinary. What happened the night the bell rang? Eleanor's eyes darkened. It's not just the bell. It's the way it rang. The vicar wasn't alone when he died. He was visited, not by a ghost, but by someone real. Someone from his past. And when that bell tolled, it wasn't a coincidence. Enola's curiosity was piqued. Who was it? Who visited him? Eleanor hesitated before speaking again. I'm afraid you might be getting involved in something dangerous, Miss Holmes. The vicar's death, the bell, it's all tied to a secret that has been hidden in this village for generations. A secret some people would do anything to protect. Enola leaned forward, her mind already racing with the possibilities. What secret? But Eleanor took a step back, her face suddenly filled with worry. I cannot say more, Miss Holmes. You've already gone too far by coming here. Some things are best left alone. Enola's eyes flicked toward the ledger on the altar. She could feel it calling to her. I'm not one to let things be, she said, her voice firm with purpose. I'll uncover the truth. Whether you help me or not. Eleanor's eyes filled with a deep sorrow as she stepped away. Be careful, Miss Holmes. Some bells, once they toll, cannot be unheard. Enola watched the woman leave, her words hanging in the air like a warning. She could feel the weight of the mystery now, its threads pulling her deeper into the village's hidden history. There was a secret here, buried beneath layers of silence, and Enola was determined to uncover it. With a final glance at the bell tower, Enola turned toward the ledger. The answers were there. She could feel them, buried within those old pages. And she would stop at nothing to uncover them. Chapter 2: The Toll of Secrets. The bell tower stood like a looming sentinel over Ashford Hollow, silent now, but Enola could feel its presence in the very air around her. The warning, though vague, lingered in her mind as she approached the altar once more. The ledger, with its old pages and yellowed ink, was the only thing that might explain why the bell had tolled twice that fateful night. And Enola, with her sharp mind and insatiable curiosity, was determined to uncover its secrets. The pages of the ledger were delicate, but they had been preserved with care, each entry written in the vicar's meticulous handwriting. Enola flipped through them, scanning for any mention of the bell, of the night in question, or of anything that could shed light on the mysterious events surrounding the vicar's death. She read through lists of parishioners, Sunday service records, and events that seemed as mundane as they were unimportant. But then, near the back, something caught her eye, an entry that stood out from the rest. It was a single line, written in a hurried, almost frantic hand. "The bell tolls for the guilty. He will not rest until it is revealed." Enola's breath caught in her throat. The bell. The guilt. The vicar's cryptic words were unmistakable. He had known something was wrong. He had known that the bell that hadn't rung in decades, was tied to something dark and sinister. She turned the page, hoping to find more, but the next entry seemed to be from a different hand, and it spoke of nothing that seemed to matter. But that one line, written with such urgency, haunted her. The bell was not just a signal for a death, it was a signal for something deeper, something that had been hidden in the shadows of Ashford Hollow. Enola had no intention of letting it remain buried. The question now was, who had the vicar been warning, and why? Enola's thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound, footsteps echoing across the church floor. She spun around quickly, expecting to see Eleanor Mallow, but instead, it was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, with a dark coat and an even darker expression. "Miss Holmes," he said, his voice low and gruff. "I presume you're here to investigate the vicar's death?" Enola regarded the man closely, noting the sternness in his face. He had the look of someone used to being in charge, though there was something in his eyes that told her he was also frustrated that a young woman had come to disturb the peace of his village. "I am," Enola replied, her voice calm. "I'm trying to understand why the bell tolled twice the night the vicar passed away." The man took a step closer, his eyes flicking nervously to the ledger in her hands. "That bell should never have rung. It hasn't in 20 years. And I doubt you'll find anything useful in that old book." The vicar was a superstitious fool, and his death was nothing more than his time coming. Enola studied him carefully. His words were dismissive, but there was something else behind them, a defensiveness, almost as if he wanted to dissuade her from looking further. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice sharp, her eyes narrowing. "Inspector Graham," he said curtly, though he seemed uncomfortable with the title. "I've been handling the investigation into the vicar's death." "It was a natural passing, Miss Holmes. Nothing more. I suggest you let it be." Enola didn't move, still holding the ledger tightly. "With all due respect, Inspector, I don't believe it was natural. The bell tolled for a reason, and that reason is tied to the vicar's death. I intend to uncover it." The inspector's expression hardened. "This isn't your business. We've got everything under control here." Enola raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a small smile. "Is that so? Then explain to me why a bell, one that has not been rung in decades, tolled twice for a man who has only just passed. There must be more to this story, Inspector. And I intend to find out what it is." The inspector's jaw clenched, but he didn't speak for a long moment. Then, with a heavy sigh, he turned toward the door. "You're wasting your time, Miss Holmes." The dead do not speak, and the living will not thank you for digging up their secrets." With that, he was gone, his footsteps echoing as he exited the church. Enola stood there, staring after him for a moment, her thoughts racing. The inspector was hiding something, that much was certain. The way he had dismissed her so easily, it was as though he already knew the answer and didn't want anyone else to uncover it. But Enola wasn't one to be deterred by someone's unwillingness to share the truth. She had learned long ago that when people tried to hide something, that was when she needed to dig the hardest. The evening was drawing in as Enola walked back through the village, her mind a whirl of thoughts. She passed by the small cottages, their windows glowing softly in the twilight. The villagers seemed unaware of the deeper currents flowing beneath the surface of their quaint lives. They went about their business as usual, gossiping and talking in low voices, their faces blank with the normalcy of everyday existence. But Enola was far from normal. She was a detective, and there was a mystery to be solved. And mysteries, she knew, never stayed buried for long. She returned to the inn where she was staying, a modest establishment on the edge of Ashford Hollow, and sat at her small desk by the window. She unwrapped the letter from Reverend Whitcomb once more, carefully reading the words that had brought her here. "I believe the bell tolls for a reason, Miss Holmes. Something has happened in Ashford Hollow, and I trust no one else to uncover the truth." Enola placed the letter aside and looked out the window, the fog rolling in over the fields. The inspector was right about one thing: this was no ordinary case. The bell had tolled twice, and someone in Ashford Hollow, was determined to keep it a secret. But Enola Holmes wasn't one to let secrets stay hidden. The next morning, Enola returned to the church, this time more determined than ever. The bell tower called to her, as though it were a living thing that had something more to say. She stood before the tower, studying the old, wooden door that led up into the bell tower. It was slightly ajar, just enough for her to slip through. She glanced around, ensuring she was alone, before slipping inside. The stairs creaked under her weight as she ascended, the air growing heavier with each step. At the top of the tower, she found the bell itself, hanging in its old frame, its surface worn and weathered by years of disuse. There, at the base of the bell, she noticed something, a small scrap of paper, wedged between the stone and the wood. With trembling hands, Enola reached down and pulled it free. The paper was old, crinkled with age, but the ink was still legible. It read, "The truth lies beneath. The bell will ring again when it's time. And time is running out." Enola's pulse quickened. This was no coincidence. The bell had rung twice, and someone was trying to stop her from uncovering what it meant. She carefully folded the paper and tucked it into her coat. There was no turning back now. The mystery was deeper than she had first suspected, and the secrets of Ashford Hollow were beginning to unravel. As Enola left the church, she knew one thing for certain: she was not alone in this search. Someone, perhaps more than one, was watching her. But Enola was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the danger. The bell had spoken, and now it was time for Enola to answer. Chapter 3: Shadows of the Past. The bell had tolled twice, a sound so unnerving in its unnaturalness that it had already begun to gnaw at the edges of Enola's mind. She had thought it would be easy: arrive, ask a few questions, solve the case. But now, standing in the heart of Ashford Hollow, with the weight of the vicar's mysterious death and the cryptic note in her coat pocket, Enola knew that this case would be anything but simple. The fog had not lifted by morning. If anything, it seemed to have thickened, as though the village itself was trying to keep its secrets from prying eyes. Enola walked through the mist-filled streets, her mind racing as she pieced together the events that had led her here. The vicar's death, the bell, the strange message, everything pointed to something buried deep in the village's past. But what was it? And why did it seem that everyone in Ashford Hollow was trying so hard to hide the truth? She returned to the inn, the small, weather-beaten building where she had spent the night, and ordered a light breakfast in the common room. The innkeeper, a stout woman with graying hair and a warm smile, had been kind enough to offer Enola some information the previous evening. But today, Enola needed more. She needed the village's history, the connections between its people. She needed to understand why this town, so seemingly peaceful, was hiding so many secrets. After her meal, Enola ventured into the village square, where a few locals were setting up market stalls. The usual village gossip filled the air, and Enola caught bits and pieces of conversation as she moved through the crowd. She stopped at a small stand selling apples, hoping to strike up a casual conversation with the vendor. The vendor, a middle-aged man with a thick beard, gave her a friendly smile. "You're not from around here, miss. What brings you to Ashford Hollow?" Enola smiled back, playing the part of the curious traveler. "I'm just passing through. But I've heard some strange things about the vicar's death. People are saying the bell rang twice the night he passed. Why would that be?" The vendor's smile faltered, and his eyes shifted nervously to the side, as though making sure no one was listening. "That's an old superstition. The bell, it's supposed to ring only when someone of importance dies. It hasn't tolled for years. The vicar's death, it just don't sit right with some folk." "Why is that?" Enola pressed, leaning slightly forward. The man hesitated, then lowered his voice. "There's a lot of things that go on here in this village that folks don't talk about. Too many questions, too many people asking about the past. I'd stay clear of those who dig too deep, miss. They might find something they don't want to." Enola's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean? What's buried here?" The man's hand twitched toward a wooden crate beside him, but he quickly pulled it back. "I don't know nothing about it. You're best off not asking too many questions. Best to just forget about the bell and move on." But Enola wasn't someone who could simply forget. Not when there were unanswered questions, when something felt wrong. She gave him a polite smile, thanked him for the apples, and moved on, her mind already turning over his words. She had learned something important. People here weren't just frightened of the bell, they were frightened of what the bell represented. It wasn't simply a signal for death. It was a signal for something darker. Enola decided it was time to speak with Eleanor Mallow again. The housekeeper had been reluctant to share information, but Enola knew that she held the key to many of Ashford Hollow's long-forgotten stories. The housekeeper's connection to the vicar, the way she had hesitated when speaking of the bell, it was clear that she knew more than she had let on. When Enola knocked on Eleanor's door that afternoon, the woman's face remained calm, but there was a flicker of unease in her eyes. "Miss Holmes," Eleanor greeted, her tone polite but reserved. "What can I do for you?" "I've been asking around the village, Mrs. Mallow," Enola began, her tone direct. The bell. The death of the vicar. People are scared to speak about it openly, but I know there's something more to this. Something you're not telling me. Eleanor stepped back slightly, as though considering whether or not to let Enola inside. Finally, she nodded and opened the door wider. Come in, then. But I warn you, Miss Holmes, some things are better left unknown. Enola entered, her eyes scanning the small sitting room as Eleanor closed the door behind them. I'm not afraid of the unknown, she said, her voice steady. Eleanor sat across from her, folding her hands in her lap. I suppose you wouldn't be. You've got that look about you. That determination. It reminds me of the vicar in his younger days. She paused, as if reflecting on something painful. He had the same look when he first came to Ashford Hollow. He didn't belong here, you know. He was a man of the cloth, but he wasn't like the others. Enola leaned forward, eager for more. What do you mean? How was he different? Eleanor hesitated. He came from London, not from a small village like ours. He didn't share in our ways, our traditions. He wasn't one for keeping quiet about things. He asked too many questions about the bell, about the old families here, about the things people were hiding. Did he uncover something? Enola pressed. Something that could explain the bell's toll? Eleanor's eyes flicked to the window nervously before she spoke again. I can't say much more, Miss Holmes. But if you truly want to know the truth, you must understand the history of this place. The vicar knew it, just like I do. The bell didn't toll for him. It tolled for the man who came before him. The one whose death started it all. Enola felt a cold shiver run down her spine. What man? Eleanor's face went pale, and she looked away, as though searching for the right words. You must leave this alone, Miss Holmes. The past has a way of catching up with us, and sometimes, it's better to let it stay buried. Enola stood, her voice unwavering. I can't leave it alone. Not now. I'll uncover the truth, no matter how deep it's buried. I need to know who started this, who rang the bell all those years ago. Eleanor stood as well, her face tight with worry. Be careful, Miss Holmes. The bell tolls not just for the dead, but for the living, too. And once it begins, it doesn't stop. Enola looked at the older woman, her heart racing. I'm not afraid. I'll find the truth, Mrs. Mallow. I promise you that. As Enola left Eleanor's house, the fog had grown heavier, the village almost suffocating under the weight of its secrets. She could feel the tension in the air, the way the villagers avoided her gaze, as if they knew she was getting too close. The bell's toll had marked the beginning of something sinister, something that had haunted this village for generations. She knew she couldn't stop now. The pieces were falling into place. The vicar, his questions, the bell. All of it pointed to something far deeper than she had imagined. And Enola Holmes wasn't one to back down when the truth was within reach. The bell had tolled, and now it was her turn to uncover why. Chapter 4, Beneath the Stone. The days that followed were heavy with an unsettling silence, the village of Ashford Hollow holding its breath as Enola Holmes dug deeper into the mystery surrounding the bell and the vicar's death. Despite the warnings from Eleanor Mallow and the unspoken tension in the village, Enola felt no hesitation. The bell had tolled for a reason, and she was determined to uncover what had triggered it. But the deeper she delved, the more elusive the truth became. It was the afternoon following her conversation with Eleanor when Enola returned to the church, intent on revisiting the bell tower. She had a suspicion that she had missed something important, a small detail, perhaps, something that could make sense of the cryptic notes and murmurs of the villagers. The church was quiet as usual, but today, there was a certain weight in the air, as though the very building was holding secrets within its walls. Enola passed through the main hall, her boots echoing on the worn stone floor, and made her way to the back of the church, where the stairs leading to the bell tower stood. The door was slightly ajar, as if inviting her in. With a steadying breath, Enola stepped into the bell tower. The light was dimmer here, filtered through the dusty windows, and the musty scent of wood and stone filled her senses. She moved toward the bell, the ancient metal gleaming faintly in the low light, its massive frame looming over her. Enola examined the area around the bell more closely this time, her eyes scanning for anything she had missed earlier. Her fingers brushed over the stone walls, tracing the cracks and grooves in the surface, as though they might reveal some hidden clue. She paused at the base of the bell, noting the jagged edges of the stone beneath it. It was then that her eyes caught something strange, something almost imperceptible. A faint marking on the stone, hidden in the shadows. A name, barely legible but still there. Enola leaned in closer, her breath caught in her throat. There, etched into the stone, was a name she recognized from the records, Thaddeus Wren. Enola's pulse quickened. Thaddeus Wren. She had come across that name in the ledger at the vicar's house. He had been the vicar's predecessor, but Enola had never understood why his name was so prominent in the records. Why had he been mentioned so many times? And why had he died so mysteriously all those years ago? The name was carved deep into the stone, as though someone wanted to ensure it was remembered, or perhaps, to make sure it was never forgotten. It seemed out of place, an eerie relic left behind in the forgotten corners of the church. Enola pressed her fingers against the engraving, feeling the cool stone beneath her touch. She traced the name slowly, deep in thought. The bell, the death, the secrecy, it all connected. She had to find out more about Thaddeus Wren. And, more importantly, why his name had been left on the very stone that had witnessed the bell toll. But before she could explore further, the sound of footsteps interrupted her thoughts. She quickly stepped back, turning toward the door. Inspector Graham stood in the doorway, his presence imposing. "I thought I'd find you here," he said, his voice clipped. "You've been poking around in places you shouldn't, Miss Holmes." Enola crossed her arms, her posture defiant. "I'm trying to understand what happened here, Inspector. Why are you so determined to keep me from finding out?" Graham's eyes darkened. "You don't know what you're dealing with. This village has a history, Miss Holmes. A history that shouldn't be uncovered." "Why? What are you hiding?" Enola asked, her voice steady but firm. The inspector's jaw tightened. "This isn't your fight. The bell tolled. The vicar died. There's nothing more to it." Enola didn't believe him. There was more to this story, and she was determined to find it. She took a step closer, her eyes meeting his with an unwavering intensity. "Tell me about Thaddeus Wren. Why was his name etched into the stone beneath the bell? And why are you so eager to stop me from uncovering the truth? Graham hesitated, and for a moment, Enola thought she saw something flicker in his eyes, something like fear. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. Wren's death is not for you to solve, the inspector said, his voice cold. You'd be better off leaving things as they are. Some things are meant to stay buried. Enola didn't back down. I can't do that. The truth won't stay buried, Inspector. And if you won't help me find it, then I'll do it on my own. Graham didn't respond immediately. He simply turned and walked out, leaving Enola standing in the bell tower, her mind racing. She had known the inspector was hiding something, but now she was more certain than ever that he knew far more than he was letting on. Thaddeus Wren, the bell, the vicar's death, it was all connected, and Enola was getting closer to understanding how. The following day, Enola returned to the church once more, determined to find more answers. She had to know who Thaddeus Wren was, what he had uncovered before his death, and why his name had been carved into the very stone beneath the bell that had tolled twice. She spent hours combing through the church's old records, finding little more than vague mentions of Wren's tenure as vicar. But then, toward the back of a leather-bound book, she found something that made her stop cold. It was a letter, addressed to Thaddeus Wren from a name she had not encountered before, Lydia Crowther. The letter was old, its edges yellowed with age, but the handwriting was still legible. It read, "I know what you've found, Thaddeus. The bell is not just a signal for death. It is a call to those who are chosen. Do not continue your investigation. The consequences will be dire. Leave it be, and you may save yourself. If you do not, the bell will toll again." Enola's heart skipped a beat. The letter, though unsigned, was a warning. Someone had known what Wren was investigating, and it was clear they wanted him to stop. The bell, it seemed, was not just a marker of death, it was something far darker. A call to those who were chosen? Enola didn't know what that meant, but she was certain it held the key to the mystery. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps once more. This time, it was Eleanor Mallow, her face pale and drawn. "Miss Holmes," she said softly, "you must stop. The bell, it's not just a relic of the past. It's a curse, one that has been passed down for generations. The truth you seek, it's dangerous. You don't know what you're getting into." Enola looked at Eleanor, her mind reeling. "What do you mean? What is this curse? What did Thaddeus Wren find?" Eleanor's eyes were filled with regret as she stepped closer. "The bell tolls not for death alone. It tolls for the chosen. For those who are drawn into a web of power and darkness that cannot be escaped. Thaddeus knew too much, and now, so do you." Enola's pulse quickened. "I'm not afraid of a bell. And I'm not afraid of secrets. I will uncover the truth." Eleanor shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "You may not be afraid of the bell, but it is afraid of you. It will not stop until you're drawn into its curse, just like the others before you." Enola stared at the woman, her mind churning with the weight of the words. The bell wasn't just a symbol of death. It was something far more insidious. And now, it was calling her, whether she was ready for it or not. Chapter 5, The Price of Truth. The warning lingered in Enola's mind as she left the church, the weight of Eleanor Mallow's words pressing on her shoulders. "The bell isn't just a symbol of death," she had said. "It's a curse." And yet, the more Enola thought about it, the more certain she became that the village's dark past, the tolling bell, and the cryptic letter from Lydia Crowther were pieces of a puzzle she couldn't let go of. The bell wasn't calling her by coincidence. The mystery surrounding it wasn't random. It was deliberate. Someone, or something, had carefully woven a trail that led directly to her. And she wasn't about to step back now. The village was quiet as Enola walked toward the inn, the fog creeping along the cobbled streets like a living thing. It was almost as if the town itself were trying to suffocate her, to keep her from digging deeper. But that only made Enola more resolute. She had always been determined when faced with an obstacle, and this case was no different. The mystery of the bell was much more than just a signal of a death. It was a warning, one that stretched across generations. She had no intention of ignoring it. Inside her room at the inn, Enola spread out the documents she had collected, the letter from Lydia Crowther, the vicar's ledger, the cryptic message etched into the stone beneath the bell, and the records of the church's long history. Each paper seemed to weigh down on her, telling her to move faster, to get closer to the truth. But how? What did Lydia Crowther mean by "the bell tolls for the chosen"? And who had been chosen? Thaddeus Wren had been an outsider, someone who had come to Ashford Hollow looking for answers, and he had died because of it. But why? The pieces were all scattered in front of her, yet the picture still eluded her. She needed more information, and there was only one person left who might know more about the bell's history, Reverend Whitcomb, the retired vicar who had sent her the letter that had brought her to Ashford Hollow in the first place. Enola had only met him once, but the man had a quiet, observant manner that made her believe he knew more than he had let on. She had to speak with him again, to see if he could shed light on the dark history surrounding the bell. The next morning, Enola set out for Whitcomb's house on the outskirts of Ashford Hollow. The fog still hung in the air, but the sun was beginning to burn through it, casting an eerie golden light over the village. As she walked, she noticed the villagers going about their daily routines, their faces tight with tension, their eyes avoiding hers. It was as if the entire village was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. When Enola arrived at Whitcomb's cottage, she knocked on the door. There was no answer. She knocked again, this time louder, and waited. The door creaked open, revealing the elderly vicar. He looked as though he had been expecting her, his eyes sharp despite his age. "Miss Holmes," he said, his voice calm but tinged with an underlying sense of urgency. "I had a feeling you would come. You've been asking questions, haven't you?" Enola stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "I've been trying to piece things together. The bell, the vicar's death, the messages I've found, they're all leading me to something, but I can't see it clearly yet. I need your help, Reverend." Whitcomb sighed, running a hand through his thin white hair. "I've seen too many people come to Ashford Hollow looking for answers, Miss Holmes. It never ends well. But you're different. I can see that in your eyes. You've got the same determination that Thaddeus Wren had. He couldn't stop asking questions, and look what happened to him." Enola stepped closer. "You know something, don't you? You know what's going on here. Why did the bell toll? Why was it so important?" Whitcomb's face softened, and he motioned for Enola to sit down. "The bell has been a part of this village for centuries, Miss Holmes. It's not just a marker of death. It's a marker of change. The villagers believe that when the bell tolls, it's a sign that something must be revealed. But not everyone is ready for the truth." Enola's curiosity deepened. "What truth? What's been hidden?" "The bell is tied to the founding of this village, to the families that came here long before us. The Wren family, the Crothers, they were the ones who built this village, and they had secrets, dark secrets. They were involved in things that no one should have known, and the bell was meant to keep those secrets hidden. It was a warning for anyone who tried to uncover the truth." Enola sat back, her mind racing. "What kind of secrets?" Whitcomb hesitated, his eyes darting around as if searching for the right words. "The Wren family, they were involved in something far darker than anyone realizes. They made deals with forces beyond their control, forces that were meant to stay in the shadows. Thaddeus Wren was the first to learn about it, and that's why he died. He was getting too close, asking too many questions. And when the bell tolled for him, it wasn't just for him. It was for anyone who dared to dig into the past." Enola leaned forward, her voice sharp with urgency. "What happened to the Wren family? Why didn't they leave the village?" "The Wren family didn't leave because they couldn't," Whitcomb said quietly. "The curse of Ashford Hollow was upon them. Those who came to the village seeking power or wealth, those who tried to control the bell, paid a terrible price. The Wren family tried to control the bell's power, but they failed. And when Thaddeus came here, he started asking questions about the old records, about the bell's origins. He had to be stopped." Enola felt a chill creep down her spine. So the bell wasn't just a symbol of death. It was a way to control the village? "Yes," Whitcomb replied, his voice low. "The bell was meant to ensure that no one ever found out the truth. It was a signal for those who understood its power. And once the bell tolled twice for Thaddeus, there was no going back. Whoever rang it had set the events in motion. And now, Miss Holmes, you've come too close to uncovering the secret." Enola stood up, her mind racing with new questions. Who else knew about the bell's power? Who else is involved? Whitcomb looked at her, his face filled with concern. "You've already met them, Miss Holmes. The ones who don't want the past to be revealed. The ones who will stop at nothing to keep the bell's secrets buried. The villagers who still hold the Wren family's legacy, and who will protect it at any cost." Enola's heart raced. She had been warned time and again, but now the pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place. The bell, the curse, the Wren family, it was all connected. And now, she was in deeper than ever before. As Enola left Reverend Whitcomb's cottage, her thoughts were consumed by the weight of what she had learned. The bell had tolled twice, but it wasn't just a signal of death. It was the start of something much darker, a legacy of power, secrets, and a curse that had bound Ashford Hollow for generations. The villagers would stop at nothing to keep the truth buried. But Enola knew she could not back down. The truth was within her grasp, and she would uncover it, no matter the cost. Chapter 6: The Veil of Darkness. The following days in Ashford Hollow felt like the air before a storm, thick, oppressive, and heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. Enola knew she was closing in on the heart of the mystery, but the closer she got, the more dangerous it became. The bell, the Wren family, the curse, it was all connected, and Ashford Hollow's dark history was slowly revealing itself, piece by piece. But there was still so much left to uncover, and Enola could feel that she was being watched, shadowed by unseen eyes as she dug deeper. Despite the warnings from Reverend Whitcomb and Eleanor Mallow, Enola couldn't stop. The puzzle was incomplete, and she knew that the final pieces were hidden somewhere in the village, buried under layers of silence and fear. Her first priority now was to speak with Lydia Crowther. The name had come up several times in her investigation, and it was clear that the Crowther family played an integral role in Ashford Hollow's dark history. From Whitcomb's cryptic warning about the bell's power to the secrets Eleanor Mallow had hinted at, it seemed that Lydia Crowther had knowledge of the bell and its tolling that could answer the most pressing questions. Enola set out for the Crowther estate on the outskirts of the village, her thoughts focused on the next step of her investigation. The estate was large and imposing, surrounded by an iron gate and a high stone wall that hid it from view. As she approached, Enola couldn't help but notice the eerie stillness in the air. It was as if the entire estate was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. She reached the front door and knocked firmly. The sound echoed through the otherwise silent grounds. After a moment, the door creaked open, revealing a middle-aged woman with sharp, calculating eyes. She was dressed in dark, somber clothing, and her posture was stiff, as though she had been expecting this visit. "You must be Miss Holmes," the woman said, her voice cool and composed. "I've heard quite a bit about you. I'm Lydia Crowther." Enola's heart skipped a beat. This was the woman who held the answers, the woman whose family was bound to the secrets of Ashford Hollow. "I need your help, Mrs. Crowther," Enola said, stepping forward with purpose. "I've been investigating the vicar's death, and I believe there's more to it than what the village is willing to admit. I need to know about the bell. What role did your family play in its power?" Lydia's face remained inscrutable, but her eyes flickered briefly, a sign that Enola had struck a chord. She stepped aside, gesturing for Enola to enter. "You're quite bold, Miss Holmes," Lydia said as she led Enola into the grand foyer. "Most people in this village would rather pretend the past doesn't exist. But you seem determined to uncover it. Very well, I will speak with you. But understand this, you're treading on dangerous ground." Enola's pulse quickened, but she remained steady. "I've faced danger before. I just want to understand the truth." Lydia nodded slightly, leading her into a small study where a fire crackled in the hearth. The room was lined with shelves filled with books, some old and dusty, others well-worn. Lydia took a seat behind a large wooden desk, and Enola sat across from her, eager for answers. "My family, the Crowthers, have always been part of this village," Lydia began, her voice calm but filled with a quiet weight. "We were among the first to settle here, and we played a significant role in its development. But there are things in Ashford Hollow's past that are best left buried." Enola leaned forward, her eyes sharp with focus. "Why? What happened here? What role did the bell play?" Lydia's expression darkened, and for the first time, there was a trace of hesitation in her eyes. "The bell is not just an instrument of death. It's a marker, a call for those who know its power, those who understand its purpose. And for generations, my family has been tied to it. We're protectors of a kind." "Protectors of what?" Enola pressed, her voice tight with urgency. Lydia took a deep breath, as if steeling herself before continuing. The bell was meant to signal the beginning of something. It wasn't just for the vicar's death or any of the others that followed. The bell tolls when a chosen one arrives, the one who can either break the curse of Ashford Hollow or reinforce it. Enola felt her heart race as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The bell wasn't just marking death, it was marking the arrival of someone with the power to change the fate of the village. The chosen one? Enola echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. What do you mean by that? The bell tolls for the one who can lift the curse, Lydia explained, her eyes intense. The Wren family started it, but it was my family, the Crothers, who became its keepers. When Thaddeus Wren died, it was a signal that someone else would come to take his place, someone who could either continue the work or end it. That's why the bell tolled when he died. The curse was passed on to someone new. Enola's mind spun. So the bell didn't toll just because the vicar died, it tolled because it marked a shift. A change. But why did it toll twice? Lydia's expression darkened further. Because the bell is not a simple mechanism. It was designed to test the one who comes next. The second toll is a challenge, a confirmation that the chosen one has arrived, but also a warning. It marks the point of no return. Enola stood up, pacing the room as the full scope of what Lydia was saying began to sink in. The curse, it's not just a curse of death, it's a curse of power. The one who is chosen is either meant to control the village or destroy it. Exactly, Lydia said, her voice softer now, tinged with regret. And Miss Holmes, I fear you've come too close to understanding this truth. There are those in this village, my family included, who have worked for generations to keep the curse contained. We didn't choose this power, but we've had no choice but to guard it. Enola's eyes flashed with determination. You've kept the secret for too long. It's time for it to end. The truth needs to be known. Lydia looked at her for a long moment, her expression a mix of sorrow and resignation. You're right. But be careful. The bell does not release its power easily. Those who come seeking answers are never the same once they've found them. Enola's resolve hardened. I'm not afraid of the bell or its power. I'm going to end this curse. Lydia's face twisted with a sad smile. I admire your courage, Miss Holmes. But I fear it may be your undoing. The bell has already marked its chosen. And that person is you. Enola froze, her heart skipping a beat. Me? Lydia nodded gravely. Yes. The bell has tolled twice for you, Miss Holmes. You are the one who will either break the curse or bind it forever. The question is, which path will you choose? Chapter 7, The Chosen Path. Enola Holmes stood frozen, the weight of Lydia Crowther's words crashing over her like a wave. The bell had tolled twice for her. She had suspected there was more to the bell than a simple symbol of death. But the revelation that she might be the chosen one, the one who could either end or perpetuate the curse of Ashford Hollow, shook her to her very core. It was one thing to solve a mystery, to unravel the layers of deception and secrecy. It was another entirely to find oneself at the center of that mystery, caught in its web. For a long moment, Enola said nothing. She stood there in Lydia Crowther's drawing room, her mind spinning with questions. How could this be? What did it mean to be the chosen one? What was the curse that had plagued this village for generations? Lydia watched her carefully, her face betraying little emotion. You may not believe me, Miss Holmes, but the bell is not simply a relic of the past. It is a living force, one that has shaped the fate of this village and its people. Your arrival, your investigation, everything has led to this moment. The bell has chosen you. Enola felt a surge of disbelief. But why me? I was just trying to understand the truth about the bell. I didn't ask for any of this. Lydia's eyes softened, a shadow of sadness flickering across her face. No one ever asks for it, Miss Holmes. The bell doesn't care for your desires or intentions. It simply marks its chosen, someone who can wield its power or destroy it. And now that you've come this far, there is no turning back. Enola's mind raced. She had always prided herself on her independence, on her ability to solve mysteries and stand on her own 2 feet. But now, faced with this impossible situation, the weight of responsibility pressed down on her. Could she really be the one to end the curse? Was it possible for her to take control of the power of the bell, or would it consume her, like it had so many others before her? You say I have a choice, Enola said slowly, her voice steadier now, but I don't know if I can trust that. What if the curse is too strong? What if I can't break it? Lydia's gaze hardened, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The curse has been passed down through the generations. It began with the Wren family, who sought to use the bell's power for their own gain. They were consumed by it, just as the Crothers were. The bell is a force of darkness, but it is also a tool. If you have the strength, you can destroy it. If you don't, she trailed off, her voice heavy with unspoken meaning. I have no choice but to try, Enola said, her voice filled with quiet determination. I can't leave Ashford Hollow in the grip of this curse. But I can't do it alone. Lydia nodded slowly, a hint of resignation in her eyes. No one ever does it alone. You will need help, Miss Holmes. You'll need those who understand the bell's power, those who can guide you. And you will need to be careful, there are others who will do everything in their power to keep the bell's secrets hidden. Even if it means destroying you. Enola felt a shiver run down her spine at the gravity of Lydia's words. She had known from the beginning that this mystery was not without danger. But now, the stakes had grown higher than ever. Where do I begin? Enola asked, her voice firm, her resolve hardening with each passing moment. Lydia stood up and walked over to a desk against the wall, opening a drawer. She pulled out a small, worn leather-bound book and handed it to Enola. This is the journal of Thaddeus Wren. It's the only record we have of what he discovered about the bell before he died. It may hold the answers you need. Enola took the journal, feeling its weight in her hands. She opened it carefully, the pages brittle and faded with age. As she flipped through the first few pages, she found a series of cryptic entries, most of them written in a hurried, frantic hand. The bell calls. I feel its pull, its power. It is not just a symbol, it is a key. I have seen the darkness it holds, and I fear what I have discovered. The curse is real, but the bell can be controlled. I must not be afraid. But I am. Enola turned the page, her fingers trembling as she read further. The bell tolled for the first time when I arrived in Ashford Hollow. I did not understand its meaning at first. but now I know. It is not just death it signals, it is power. A power I was never meant to understand. If I cannot break the curse, then it will consume me, and I will become part of it. Enola's heart raced as she read the last words of the entry. I must warn them. Whoever comes next will be the one who decides whether the curse is broken or continued. I hope they have the strength to destroy it, because I do not. The bell will toll again. The last entry was dated the night Thaddeus Wren died. Enola closed the journal, her thoughts racing. The bell wasn't just a symbol of death, it was the key to something much larger, something far more dangerous. Thaddeus Wren had tried to break the curse, but had failed. And now, the bell had marked her. She was the next in line, the one who had to decide the fate of Ashford Hollow. The sound of footsteps outside the study door interrupted her thoughts. Enola looked up to see Lydia standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. There are others who will try to stop you, Miss Holmes, Lydia said softly, her eyes dark with concern. You must be prepared. The power of the bell is not to be underestimated. Enola nodded, her jaw set in determination. I'll do whatever it takes. I won't let the curse continue. Not if I can help it. Lydia gave her a long, searching look, as if weighing Enola's resolve. Finally, she spoke again, her voice soft but resolute. Then we must act quickly. The bell will toll again soon, and when it does, there will be no turning back. If you are truly the chosen one, Miss Holmes, you must decide what you will do with that power. Enola stood tall, her heart steady with purpose. I won't let it control me. I'll destroy it, no matter the cost. Enola left the Crowther estate with the journal in her hand, her mind clearer than it had been in days. She had a purpose now, one that she couldn't turn away from, no matter how daunting the task ahead seemed. The bell had chosen her, and now it was up to her to choose the fate of Ashford Hollow. But the path ahead was fraught with danger. The bell's power was not easily broken, and there were forces in the village that would do anything to keep its secrets hidden. Enola knew she couldn't do this alone. As the fog rolled in, Enola made her way back to the center of the village. She was going to need allies, people who would stand with her, even when the village turned against her. And she was determined to find them, no matter the cost. The bell had tolled. And now, the clock was ticking. Chapter 8, The Final Toll. Enola stood at the edge of Ashford Hollow, watching the fog roll in like a living thing, thickening and suffocating the village. The air felt heavy, laden with the secrets that had been buried here for centuries. She clutched the journal of Thaddeus Wren tightly in her hand, the weight of its revelations pressing down on her chest. The bell had tolled twice, but now she understood what that meant. It was more than a signal of death, it was a call to action, a challenge, a test. The bell had marked her as the one who could either break the curse of Ashford Hollow or continue the cycle of darkness that had plagued the village for generations. The power of the bell was hers to control, but the cost of that control was still unknown. She turned back toward the village, her mind focused on the task ahead. She couldn't afford to waste any more time. The village was on edge, the residents fearful of the curse's return. Enola had seen it in their eyes, the fear that had gripped them since the bell had tolled for Thaddeus Wren. And now, as the chosen one, she had to make a choice. Would she wield the bell's power, or would she destroy it? The first place Enola went was to the church. It had been the source of her investigation from the beginning, the place where the bell hung, where the mystery had all started. The bell tower was the key to everything, and Enola knew that she had to face it head-on if she wanted to stop the curse. As she walked up the familiar path to the church, she could hear the faint sound of the bell in the distance, a low toll that seemed to echo through her very soul. Her heart raced. The bell was calling her again. And this time, she couldn't ignore it. The door to the church creaked open, and Enola stepped inside. The air was cold, the faint smell of incense still lingering from the last service. The church was empty, silent, save for the soft echo of her footsteps as she made her way to the back. She didn't need to look around anymore. She knew exactly where she was headed. The bell tower stood tall before her, its looming presence dominating the space. Enola walked toward it, her eyes drawn to the massive bell that hung above. It seemed almost alive, as though it were watching her, waiting for her to make a decision. The power of the bell pulsed through the very stones of the church, and Enola could feel its weight in her chest. She stood beneath it, the journal of Thaddeus Wren still clutched in her hands. The answers she sought were close, she could feel them in the air, in the very walls of the church. But she needed one last piece of the puzzle before she could make her choice. "Show me the truth," she whispered, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. For a long moment, nothing happened. The bell remained still, silent above her. But then, something shifted. The air grew heavier, and Enola could feel the temperature drop, a cold shiver running down her spine. The bell began to move. It wasn't the slow, steady toll that Enola had heard before. This was different, faster, sharper, almost frantic. The sound reverberated through the very bones of the church, rattling the walls, shaking the stone beneath her feet. Enola stepped back, her heart racing. The bell was calling her. It was ready to choose. Before she could react, the church door slammed open, and Enola spun around, instinctively reaching for the hidden weapon she carried. But it wasn't a threat waiting for her at the door, it was Inspector Graham. His face was tight with frustration, and his eyes held a mix of warning and something darker, something she couldn't quite place. "Miss Holmes," he said sharply, his voice gruff. "I thought I told you to stop. The bell doesn't need to be meddled with. It's not a toy. It's not something you can control." Enola didn't lower her stance. "You're wrong, Inspector. It's not a toy, it's a tool. A key to something that's been hidden for far too long. The curse that's haunted Ashford Hollow for generations. And I'm the one who will put an end to it." Graham stepped into the church, his gaze flicking toward the bell above them, his face tightening even further. "You don't understand the danger you're in, Miss Holmes. The bell isn't something that can be destroyed. It's too powerful. It has a will of its own." "I don't need to destroy it," Enola said, her voice steady, though the weight of his words still lingered. "I need to control it. I need to stop it from taking anyone else." Graham shook his head, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You're making a terrible mistake. The bell has a mind of its own. You can't fight it. No one can. It will use you, just like it used key others before you." Enola took a step forward, her gaze unwavering. "I won't be used. I will stop it." I have to. This village deserves peace. The bell rang out again, louder this time, its sound echoing through the empty church. Enola felt it deep in her chest, the pull, the call. The power of the bell was undeniable. Suddenly, she knew what she had to do. She turned to the bell, her heart pounding, and with a steady breath, she climbed the stairs toward the tower. The bell tolled again, but this time, it felt different. The power was within her grasp. She could feel it, almost taste it in the air. When she reached the bell, she didn't hesitate. The moment was upon her. She reached out and touched the cold metal. A jolt of energy shot through her body, and for a moment, she thought she would be swallowed by the bell's power. But she held on. She gripped the metal with all her strength and focused on the task at hand. She could hear the bell's voice in her mind, the ancient power calling her, tempting her to embrace it. But Enola didn't yield. She held firm, pushing against the wave of power with every ounce of strength she had. The bell's toll began to slow, its sharp sound fading into a deep, resonant hum. Slowly, the bell stilled. Enola took a deep breath, her heart still racing, but the power in the air was gone. The bell had been silenced. She turned to face Inspector Graham, who had followed her up the tower, his eyes wide with disbelief. "It's done," Enola said quietly, her voice steady but filled with exhaustion. "The curse is broken. Ashford Hollow is free." Graham stared at her for a long moment, and then, slowly, he nodded. "You've done it, Miss Holmes. You've broken the curse. I didn't think it was possible." Enola turned back to the bell, its silence now peaceful, almost serene. The storm had passed. Ashford Hollow was finally free. Chapter 9, The Calm After the Storm. The silence in the bell tower was deafening. After the final, resonant toll faded away, a heavy stillness settled over Ashford Hollow, as if the village itself had exhaled a collective sigh of relief. The power that had pulsed through the bell, the curse that had gripped the village for generations, was finally gone. Enola stood alone in the tower, her heart still racing from the intense energy that had coursed through her when she touched the bell. It had been a struggle, a battle between her will and the bell's ancient power, but she had won. She took a deep breath, her body still tingling with the residual force of the bell. The village had been marked by its influence for centuries, but now the weight was gone. The curse was broken. Turning to face the tower window, Enola looked out over Ashford Hollow. The fog had lifted, revealing the familiar cobblestone streets, the crooked rooftops, and the distant hills beyond the village. For the first time since her arrival, the landscape seemed peaceful. The ominous presence of the bell had been banished, leaving only the quiet, ordinary world that had existed before the power of the curse took root. But though the village seemed peaceful now, Enola knew that this was only the beginning of a different kind of journey. She had broken the curse, but the echoes of what had happened, the bell's power, the dark history of Ashford Hollow, would follow her. There would be no forgetting. And she had learned lessons along the way that would stay with her for the rest of her life. When Enola descended the stairs from the bell tower, she found Inspector Graham waiting for her at the bottom. His face was somber, but his eyes were filled with something like respect. "You've done it, Miss Holmes," he said, his voice quiet. "I didn't think it was possible. But you've broken the curse. Ashford Hollow is free." Enola nodded, though she didn't feel the weight of triumph she had expected. She had freed the village, yes, but the cost of that freedom had been high, and the toll on her own soul was not yet clear. The power she had faced, the temptation of the bell's pull, it had been overwhelming, and Enola couldn't deny the lure it had presented. For a brief moment, she had felt that she could control it, shape it to her will. But the temptation had passed, and she had done what needed to be done. "I didn't do it alone," she said, her voice steady. "There were people who helped me, people who kept me grounded when the bell's power threatened to overtake me." Graham raised an eyebrow. "Grounded? You looked like you were about to take control of that bell, Miss Holmes. You weren't going to give up." Enola's lips curled into a small, rueful smile. "I wasn't about to give up. But there was always more at stake than just me. This village deserved to be free, to live without the shadow of the curse. I couldn't let it continue, not after everything I'd learned." Graham hesitated for a moment, as though considering his words. "I think you've earned a bit of peace, Miss Holmes. Ashford Hollow is free, and you've done what no one else could. You're done here. You've solved the mystery." Enola didn't respond immediately. She looked out over the village again, her mind turning over the last few days. The bell, the curse, the villagers who had tried to keep their secrets buried, it had all led to this moment. But the answers hadn't come easily. And though the mystery had been solved, Enola knew that there were still more questions left unanswered. There was still so much to learn, to uncover. "I've solved the mystery," she said slowly, "but I don't think I'm done here. There's still more to this village than meets the eye. There's more to me than I've realized. I've come face to face with the kind of power I never expected to encounter, and I don't know if I can just walk away from that." Graham studied her for a long moment. "You're a determined one, Miss Holmes. More than I gave you credit for when I first met you." Enola gave him a wry smile. "I think I've earned a bit of respect from you, haven't I?" He chuckled, though it was tinged with a sadness Enola couldn't quite place. "You have. And I'm glad I was wrong about you. But be careful, Miss Holmes. There are some forces in this world that aren't meant to be controlled. You've seen the danger the bell posed. Don't go looking for another one." Enola's smile faded as she considered his words. She knew the inspector was right. There were forces far beyond her understanding in this world, and not all of them could be defeated with sheer willpower. But the truth was, she wasn't the same person who had arrived in Ashford Hollow. She had faced something far darker than anything she'd encountered before, and it had changed her. "I'll be careful," she said finally, her voice softer than before. "But I can't stop now. There are mysteries out there, things hidden in the shadows. And I intend to find them." That evening, as Enola walked through the quiet village, the sense of peace she had longed for finally settled over her. The curse was broken. The bell was silent. Ashford Hollow had been freed. But as Enola walked toward the inn, she realized that the journey she had begun in this small, quiet village was only the beginning. The mysteries that still lay ahead, the stories that had yet to be uncovered, those were what called to her now. She was no longer just the younger sister of Sherlock Holmes. She was Enola Holmes, a detective in her own right, ready to face whatever came next. She had broken the bell's curse, but there were other secrets waiting for her. And she would stop at nothing to uncover them. Chapter 10: New Beginnings. The days after Enola Holmes broke the curse of Ashford Hollow were filled with a strange sense of calm. The village, once suffocating under the weight of its secrets, now seemed to breathe freely, the fog lifting both literally and metaphorically. Enola had expected to feel a sense of triumph, but instead, she felt only the quiet satisfaction of a mystery solved and a curse broken. Yet deep down, she knew that this victory was only a chapter in the larger story of her life. The villagers, though still cautious, were beginning to return to their routines. The market square buzzed once more with the sounds of bargaining, children played in the streets without fear, and the church bell, now silent, stood as a reminder of what had once been and what had been overcome. Enola found herself in the village square one last time before she left. The air was crisp with the promise of winter, and the golden hues of autumn had already begun to fade. She had packed her belongings, and her time in Ashford Hollow was drawing to an end. The village no longer needed her. But the mysteries of the world, the ones that lay beyond the small streets and quiet cottages of this place, were still waiting for her. Her next adventure, Enola knew, was out there waiting to be uncovered. As she walked toward the inn, her thoughts turned to the inspector. Graham had been a reluctant ally, skeptical of her ability to solve the mystery of the bell. But in the end, he had stood beside her, offering support when it mattered most. He had been right, in a way, when he warned her of the dangers of meddling with forces beyond her understanding. But Enola also knew that she could never back away from a challenge, not when there was truth to be found. She found him standing at the edge of the square, his hands in his pockets, his expression thoughtful. When he saw her, he straightened up and walked toward her, his brow furrowed. "I thought I might find you here," he said, his voice a little gruff but with a note of something softer beneath it. "I heard the bell toll for the last time." "It's done, then?" Enola nodded, her lips pressing into a tight smile. "It's done. The curse is broken. Ashford Hollow is free." The inspector's gaze softened, and for the first time, he seemed to understand the weight of what Enola had done. "I'm sorry for doubting you, Miss Holmes. You were right. You did it." "I didn't do it alone," Enola said, her voice steady but filled with quiet pride. "I had help. From people like you, who wanted to see the truth uncovered, even if they didn't know how deep it went." Graham nodded, a hint of admiration in his eyes. "I still can't believe you managed to control the bell's power. I thought it would consume you." Enola took a deep breath, her mind returning to the moment in the bell tower, when the power of the bell had nearly overwhelmed her. She had felt the pull, the lure of its ancient magic, and for a brief moment, she had wondered if she might be consumed by it. But in the end, her determination, her need to uncover the truth, had given her the strength to resist. "I'm not sure I controlled it," she admitted. "But I made sure it didn't control me." The inspector studied her for a long moment, his eyes scanning her face, as if weighing her words. "You're something else, Miss Holmes. I thought you were just a young woman who liked to poke around and ask too many questions. But I see now, you're a force to be reckoned with." Enola smiled, a little mischievously. "You're not so bad yourself, Inspector. You were the one who helped me when it mattered. I won't forget that." Graham chuckled, the tension in his shoulders easing a little. "I didn't think I'd ever say this, but I'm glad you came to Ashford Hollow, Miss Holmes. The village is better for it. Enola's smile softened. I'm glad I came too. But now, there are more mysteries out there. And I intend to solve them. She turned to leave, but Graham's voice stopped her. Miss Holmes, he said, a note of uncertainty creeping into his voice. What will you do now? Enola paused, her back still turned to him. I don't know yet. I'll follow the clues, wherever they lead. There's always something waiting to be uncovered. And as long as there's a mystery out there, I'll be there to solve it. She turned to face him, her eyes gleaming with determination. Maybe you'll join me one day. You might just find you enjoy a little bit of mystery. Graham smiled, though there was a hint of something bittersweet in his expression. I think I'll stick to law and order, Miss Holmes. But I'll be keeping an eye on you. If you ever need help again, you know where to find me. Enola nodded, a spark of warmth in her chest. Thank you, Inspector. With that, she turned and walked away, the village fading into the distance behind her. She didn't look back. As Enola left Ashford Hollow, the road ahead seemed endless, full of possibilities and challenges. She had solved the mystery of the bell, broken the curse that had held the village in its grip for so long. But there were more mysteries waiting for her, more secrets to uncover. And Enola was ready for them. The world beyond Ashford Hollow was vast, full of shadows, hidden truths, and untold stories. Enola Holmes knew that her work was far from over. The path she walked would not be easy, but it was hers to follow. She would follow the clues, no matter where they led, and she would continue to challenge the darkness, bringing light to the secrets that hid in the shadows. And so, with a heart full of purpose and a mind sharp as ever, Enola set off toward the horizon, ready for whatever adventure awaited her next. Chapter 12: The Hidden Hand. Enola Holmes stood over the lifeless body of the man in the warehouse, her eyes still fixed on the strange symbol carved into his neck. The weight of the discovery, the mystery that now hung heavily in the air, felt suffocating. This was no ordinary case. The body was connected to something ancient, something hidden, and someone out there was willing to do anything to keep it buried. Her hand brushed over the edge of her coat, feeling the comforting weight of the tools she always carried, her magnifying glass, her notebook, her ink and quills, each item a small piece of her arsenal in the war for truth. But this case, this one was different. It wasn't just about uncovering hidden details, it was about unraveling a conspiracy that could stretch beyond London itself. As Enola stood there, her mind raced. The symbol on the man's neck was unmistakable, though it had taken her a few moments to recall it in her fog of exhaustion and urgency. She had seen it in a dusty old tome her mother had once shown her, the symbol of the Order of the Black Hand, a secret society that had operated across Europe for centuries. They were rumored to deal in power, manipulation, and even darker arts, mysterious, elusive, and dangerous. They were believed to be nothing more than a myth, something whispered about in hushed tones in the back rooms of Parliament. But now, it was real. Lord Edward Mallory's voice broke her concentration. Miss Holmes, is it as bad as I think? He asked, his voice tense, his face drawn. Enola turned to him, her eyes sharp with focus. It's worse, she said quietly. This man didn't just die by accident. He was marked. That symbol, it's the mark of an ancient secret society. The Order of the Black Hand. They've been linked to some of the most powerful and covert movements in history. And now, it seems, they're involved in something much closer to home. Mallory's face paled even further. The Black Hand? But what would they want with a man like this? He's no one of consequence. That's exactly why they'd target him, Enola replied, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. The Black Hand operates in the shadows. They pull strings behind the scenes, using pawns like this man to further their own hidden agenda. Lord Mallory shook his head. But I don't understand. Why would they kill him here? And why leave him for me to find? Enola's mind raced with possibilities. There was something off about the way Mallory had been drawn into this. He was not a fool, but his position as a nobleman in London meant he had more connections, more influence than most. The Black Hand wasn't an organization that left anything to chance. If they wanted to remain hidden, they would never allow someone like Mallory to become involved. That's when it hit her. They didn't leave him for you to find, Lord Mallory, Enola said, her voice laced with realization. They knew you would find him. Mallory stared at her, confused. What do you mean? The timing of it all, Enola explained, her brow furrowing as she pieced the puzzle together. You've been investigating something, haven't you? Perhaps something political, something the Black Hand doesn't want uncovered. Mallory stiffened. I can't discuss that with you, Miss Holmes. But I can assure you, whatever they're involved in, it's far bigger than any one man. I may have underestimated how far their reach is, but I'm not the only one looking into them. Someone from the inside has been feeding me information. Enola's eyes narrowed. You've been getting information from inside the organization? She stepped closer to him, her voice low. Who is it, Lord Mallory? Who is feeding you this? I don't know, Mallory admitted, his voice strained. All I know is that it's someone high up. Someone who has access to everything. But they've been careful, never meeting in person. Always through letters, coded messages. I've barely scratched the surface of their true plans. Enola's mind was working at full speed now. The Black Hand's infiltration into the highest levels of society was far more dangerous than she had realized. This wasn't just a small conspiracy, it was something much larger. And whoever Mallory's inside contact was, they were clearly trying to guide him into uncovering something crucial, something the Black Hand wanted to stay hidden. Where are the letters, Lord Mallory? Enola asked, her voice sharp. You said they were coded. We need to see them. We need to understand what they're planning. Mallory hesitated. I have them. But you must understand, they're dangerous. If the wrong people find them. I can handle it, Enola said firmly. We need to act quickly. The longer we wait, the more dangerous this becomes. We need to decode those letters and uncover exactly what they're trying to do before they succeed. A few hours later, Enola found herself sitting in a dimly lit room in Mallory's townhouse, carefully examining the letters the nobleman had been receiving. Each letter was written in an elaborate cipher, one that Enola had encountered before but never fully understood. The Black Hand was known for their complex codes, which shifted regularly to confuse and thwart outsiders. But Enola had faced tougher challenges. She set to work, her mind focused, her hand steady as she deciphered the first few lines of the code. It took time, but eventually, the message began to reveal itself. And when it did, Enola's heart sank. The letter contained detailed information about a powerful artifact, a relic believed to have been lost for centuries. The Black Hand was planning to acquire it, and they believed it held the key to controlling an unimaginable power. But the specifics were vague, and Enola knew she would need more information to understand what this artifact truly was, and why the Black Hand would go to such lengths to obtain it. As Enola worked through the letter, her mind kept returning to the body on the docks. It wasn't just an accidental death. Whoever had been killed knew too much, and now, they had become a pawn in the Black Hand's game. But the game wasn't over. Enola knew it had only just begun. Later that night, Enola stood at the edge of the Thames, the fog once again rolling in thick and silent. She had spent the last few hours combing through the letters, piecing together the connections. But she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more, something hidden beneath the surface of the Black Hand's operations. The wind blew cold, and Enola pulled her coat tighter around her, her mind racing. The Black Hand was no longer a shadowy legend, it was real. And it was more dangerous than she had ever imagined. But Enola Holmes wasn't afraid. She was determined to bring the truth to light, no matter the cost. Whoever was behind the Black Hand, whoever had orchestrated the murder of the man she'd found at the docks, would not escape her investigation. She would find the artifact, uncover the truth behind the Black Hand's sinister plans, and stop them before they could wreak havoc on the world. Chapter 13: Secrets Beneath the Surface. The darkness of London's streets seemed to deepen with every passing hour. The city had always been full of secrets, but tonight, those secrets felt even heavier. Enola Holmes was on the verge of uncovering something far bigger than she had imagined, and the more she delved into the case of the Black Hand, the more she realized how dangerous this web of conspiracies truly was. The body they had found on the docks was just the beginning. The coded letters from Lord Mallory's mysterious inside contact had pointed her toward an artifact that, if it fell into the wrong hands, could shift the balance of power in ways she couldn't yet fully comprehend. The Black Hand was after it, and they would stop at nothing to obtain it. Enola had spent the last few days carefully piecing together the information from the letters, but even now, she didn't fully understand the nature of the artifact. The ciphers were difficult, but she had cracked the most recent one, and she now knew where the Black Hand was planning to make their next move. She met with Lord Mallory again the following evening, in a private room at a discreet tavern near the docks. It was a place he trusted, away from the prying eyes of London's aristocracy and the looming shadow of the Black Hand's influence. The fire in the hearth crackled as Enola sat at the small wooden table, her mind already racing through the possibilities. Lord Mallory walked in, looking grim as ever. He nodded at her with a mixture of respect and caution. "You've decoded the letters, Miss Holmes. I trust you've learned something useful." "I have," Enola replied, setting the papers down on the table between them. "The Black Hand is looking for an artifact, one that could change everything. They believe it has the power to give them control over something immense. But we don't know exactly what that something is." Mallory sat down across from her, his hands clasped tightly together. "And where is it? The artifact?" "According to the letters, it's being kept in a hidden location," Enola said, her eyes scanning the information she had uncovered. "But they've left only partial clues. The rest is encrypted. We need to find the full map, the rest of the information, before they do. Lord Mallory shifted uncomfortably. And what if they already have it? What if the artifact is already in their hands? Enola leaned in, her voice firm with conviction. Then it's even more important we stop them, before it's too late. The longer the Black Hand holds it, the more dangerous they become. The two of them spent the next several hours poring over the letters and the maps, trying to piece together the final location of the artifact. Enola had learned much, but the last piece of the puzzle eluded her. The Black Hand had used so many layers of encryption that each answer only led to more questions. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, Enola felt the weight of the night settle in her bones. She stood up and stretched, feeling the exhaustion creep into her limbs. "Lord Mallory," she said, her tone sharper now, "there's one more thing we haven't considered." Mallory looked at her, his brow furrowing. "What's that?" "The man who was killed, the one whose body was found at the docks. He didn't just stumble onto the Black Hand's operations. He was placed there. His death was no accident. He was a message to someone, perhaps even to you." Mallory's face darkened. "Do you think someone is trying to silence me?" "I do," Enola replied, her voice resolute. "They're trying to scare you off. Whoever is feeding you information inside the Black Hand knows you're getting too close." Mallory stared at her, his expression unreadable. "I won't back down. I'm not afraid of them. But I won't risk the lives of those I care about." Enola placed a hand on the table, looking him straight in the eye. "Then let's end this. Together." The following evening, Enola and Mallory set out to follow the last known lead, a small, unassuming house on the outskirts of London, near the docks where the Black Hand had operated for years. It was the kind of place no one would think to look twice at, shrouded in shadow, tucked away behind a maze of alleyways and forgotten warehouses. As they approached the house, Enola felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. There was something off about the place, something that didn't sit right. The air was still, the streets eerily quiet, as though the entire area was holding its breath. "I don't like this," Enola murmured, her eyes scanning the shadows around them. "We should be careful. The Black Hand isn't the only one who knows about this place." Mallory glanced around nervously. "You're right. We don't know what we're walking into." Enola gave him a look that was both reassuring and determined. "That's why we're going in carefully. We'll make sure to stay hidden. And remember, we're not looking for a confrontation. We're looking for answers." They crept toward the building, their footsteps muffled by the thick fog that had settled in, and reached the door. Mallory knocked gently, and after a moment, the door creaked open. A figure stood in the doorway, a woman, her face shadowed, but her eyes sharp and wary. "I assume you're Miss Holmes," the woman said, her voice low and hushed. "And Lord Mallory, I presume?" Enola nodded, stepping forward. "We've come for the artifact. We know you're the one who has it, or at least, we believe you do." The woman stepped aside, allowing them to enter. Inside, the room was dimly lit, its walls lined with shelves of old books and strange artifacts. The woman's movements were fluid, practiced. Enola had no doubt she was someone who lived in the shadows, just like the Black Hand. "You're close," the woman said, her voice barely a whisper. But not all of you know the full truth. Enola's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? The woman's eyes flicked toward Mallory, then back to Enola. The artifact you seek, it doesn't give power. It is power. And it is connected to something older, something more dangerous than the Black Hand can ever imagine. They're not the only ones hunting it. Enola exchanged a glance with Mallory, her mind racing with the possibilities. Who else was after the artifact? What ancient power did it hold? The woman smiled darkly. You've just touched the surface, Miss Holmes. Now, the real game begins. Chapter 14, Into the Heart of Shadows. Enola Holmes stood at the threshold of the dimly lit room, the weight of the woman's cryptic words still echoing in her mind. The artifact doesn't give power. It is power. Those words lingered like a dark omen. She had thought she was close to unraveling the mystery of the Black Hand and the artifact they sought, but now, it seemed, she had only begun to scratch the surface of a much larger conspiracy. The woman who had led them here, an unknown ally, or perhaps a shadow within the Black Hand, had opened a door, but the answers behind it were still unclear. Enola had no choice but to follow the trail, no matter how dangerous it became. Who are you? Enola asked, her voice steady but filled with curiosity. What do you know about the artifact? The woman didn't answer immediately. She moved to the far side of the room, where an assortment of curious objects lay scattered on a table, old maps, strange trinkets, and yellowed pages of parchment. Her movements were precise, measured, as though everything had been planned down to the last detail. I was once part of the order, the woman said, her voice low and almost regretful. The Black Hand is more than a simple organization. It's a web, a network of people who understand the true power of the artifact. They've been searching for it for centuries, but they don't understand it. They seek it for control, for dominion over others. But they're missing the point. They're playing with forces they can't even comprehend. Enola listened intently, her mind racing. She had known the Black Hand was dangerous, but the deeper she got into this case, the more it seemed like the stakes were even higher than she had imagined. The artifact was not merely a tool of power, it was something far more profound, something that could alter the very fabric of reality itself. And you? Mallory asked, his voice edged with suspicion. Why are you helping us? If you're part of the order, why betray them? The woman's eyes flicked to Mallory, her gaze cold but not without a hint of sadness. I was once like them. But I saw the truth. The artifact must be destroyed. It's too powerful for anyone to possess. I can't allow the Black Hand to gain control over it. They will bring about their own destruction. Enola nodded slowly, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place. Then we need to find it before they do. But how? We don't know where it is. The woman gestured to the table, where a worn map lay partially unrolled. The artifact isn't just hidden. It's tied to certain locations, places of power, places where the veil between this world and something else is thin. The Black Hand has been searching for these locations, using their influence to get closer to the artifact. But they haven't been able to uncover the final piece of the puzzle. Enola's eyes narrowed as she studied the map. There were symbols marking various locations, some familiar, others unknown. What are these places? She asked, leaning in closer. What do they have to do with the artifact? The woman's voice dropped even lower. They are ancient sites, hidden from the world. Some are in plain sight, disguised as ordinary places. Others are lost to history, buried beneath layers of time. Each site holds a clue, a key that will lead to the artifact's true location. But there's one place, the final site, where the artifact can be unlocked. That's where the Black Hand will go next. Enola's heart began to race. And where is this final site? The woman's face was grave, her eyes shadowed with the weight of knowledge she had tried to forget. It's not a place you can simply find on a map. It's a place buried in the past, hidden by the very people who built the Black Hand to begin with. The Order's founders were seeking something ancient, something that should have remained lost. And that's what the artifact represents, the key to something even older, something darker. Mallory stepped forward, his voice urgent. We don't have time to waste. If the Black Hand is heading there next, we need to stop them. Enola nodded, her mind already spinning with plans and possibilities. But there was one more question that lingered, one that she hadn't dared to ask yet. How do we destroy it? She asked, her voice quiet but steady. The artifact. How do we stop it once we find it? The woman hesitated, her gaze flicking to the corners of the room, as if searching for an answer she wasn't sure she could give. The artifact is bound to an ancient ritual, she said softly. A ritual that must be completed in order to seal its power. But the ritual is dangerous. It requires knowledge that only a few people possess, and even then, it can only be performed in the right place. It is a risk, one that few would dare to take. But if the Black Hand completes the ritual, the world as we know it will change. And not for the better. Enola felt a chill spread down her spine. The stakes had never been higher. The Black Hand wasn't just after an artifact, they were after the power to reshape reality itself. The thought of what could happen if they succeeded made Enola's blood run cold. We can't let that happen, she said firmly. We need to stop them before it's too late. The three of them, the woman, Mallory, and Enola, spent the next several hours working through the clues, poring over the map, and decoding the symbols that had been left behind. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but the final steps were still elusive. They needed more information. They needed to act quickly. As the sun began to rise, Enola stood by the window, looking out over the darkened city. The fog was thick again, shrouding London in its familiar veil of mystery. But now, the fog felt different. It felt like a sign that the truth was out there, just waiting to be uncovered. Mallory came up beside her, his voice quiet. You've been through a lot, Miss Holmes. Are you sure you're ready for this? This isn't just about solving a mystery anymore. This is about stopping something that could change the world. Enola turned to him, her eyes steady. I've always been ready, Lord Mallory. I may not have known what I was walking into when I first arrived, but I do now. The world is full of secrets, and I've spent my life uncovering them. This is no different. She turned back to the map, her resolve hardening. We're going to stop the Black Hand. Whatever it takes. The hunt for the artifact was just beginning, but Enola knew one thing for certain: the deeper she went into this mystery, the more dangerous it became. The Black Hand would stop at nothing to gain control of the artifact. and they would do whatever it took to keep its true power hidden. But Enola Holmes had never been afraid of the dark. She would face the shadows head-on, and she would uncover the truth, no matter where it led. Chapter 15: The Final Reveal. The morning fog had not yet lifted, and the streets of London felt strangely hollow, the air thick with tension. Enola Holmes stood at the edge of the dock, the cold bite of the wind wrapping around her like an unseen force. The artifact, its true nature still partially obscured, had led them here. The Black Hand was close, and time was running out. Her mind raced through the details, the ancient ritual, the dangerous power the artifact held, and the Black Hand's plans to use it to reshape the world. But the more she uncovered, the more she realized just how much she didn't know. Every turn she took, every clue she uncovered, only led to deeper questions. The Black Hand's motives were obscured by centuries of secrecy, but Enola could feel the danger mounting, threatening to consume everything in its path. She wasn't alone in this. Lord Mallory had stood by her side throughout the entire investigation, his loyalty unwavering, even as the stakes rose higher. The woman who had been their guide, someone who had once been part of the Black Hand, had given them the final clues they needed. But now, they were on the verge of the artifact's location, the final piece of the puzzle. The Black Hand was ahead of them. They had already infiltrated the area, and the silence of the docks now felt like the calm before the storm. It was a race against time, and the question wasn't just about whether they could stop them, it was whether they could survive what was coming next. Enola's eyes flicked over the map one last time, the inked symbols and cryptic notations coming together in her mind. She could see the path, the hidden sites, the cryptic messages, the lies, but one location stood out above all the others. It was a place that had been mentioned in passing, a place that hadn't seemed significant until now. A hidden vault, buried beneath the surface of London, somewhere between the heart of the city and the very edge of its underbelly. A place where the artifact would be unlocked, and its full power would be realized. She had to act fast. "This is it," Enola said, her voice steady, though her heart was pounding. "The artifact is underground. They'll be trying to access it now." Mallory nodded, his face grim. "We're too late." Enola's gaze hardened. "No. We're not too late. We'll stop them." They rushed down the alley, their footsteps quick and determined. The vault was close now, the final confrontation looming. As they reached the entrance to the underground passage, Enola's hand instinctively went to the small hidden compartment inside her coat, where she kept a small set of tools. There would be no room for hesitation, no time for doubt. The Black Hand was powerful, but they weren't invincible. Not with Enola Holmes on their trail. They reached the vault just as the sun began to dip beneath the horizon, casting the city in long shadows. The air was heavy with the tension of what was about to unfold. The door was massive, iron and steel, covered in ancient symbols that Enola recognized from her studies of occult history. This was no ordinary lock. It had been designed to resist anyone who wasn't meant to open it. But Enola had never been one to shy away from a challenge. She pulled out her tools and set to work, her fingers moving with precision, her mind focused entirely on the task at hand. Mallory watched her silently, knowing that everything they had worked for would come down to this moment. Minutes later, there was a soft click, and the massive door creaked open. Inside was a large chamber, its walls lined with strange, ancient relics. At the far end of the room, illuminated by a single flickering torch, lay a pedestal. On it, the artifact. Enola's breath caught in her throat as she saw it. It wasn't just a simple object, it was a thing of power, its very presence pulsing with an energy that seemed to vibrate through the air. The artifact was not just an object, it was a key. A key to something far greater than anyone had realized. "We have to destroy it," Enola whispered urgently, her mind already racing through the possibilities. "We can't let them use it." Just as she stepped forward, the sound of footsteps echoed through the chamber. Figures emerged from the shadows, the Black Hand had arrived. "Too late, Miss Holmes," came a voice from the darkness. "The artifact is ours now." Enola's eyes narrowed as the figures stepped into the light, revealing their faces. Among them was a man she recognized, someone she had only seen in passing, someone powerful enough to be part of the Black Hand's inner circle. He smiled coldly, his eyes filled with malice. "Lord Mallory," he said, his voice mocking. "I'm surprised you've come this far. But it's over now. The artifact will give us everything we've worked for. And you'll never be able to stop us." Enola didn't flinch. She stepped forward, her voice steady and commanding. "You're wrong. The artifact isn't meant for anyone to control. It's too dangerous. You'll destroy everything if you use it." The man laughed. "You think you can stop us? You don't even understand its true power. You're out of your depth, Miss Holmes." Mallory stepped beside her, his face hard with resolve. "You're wrong. We do understand. And it ends here." With one swift motion, Enola reached into her coat and pulled out a small vial, a concoction of her own making, one that would neutralize the artifact's power. She had spent days studying the ancient texts, perfecting the formula. This was her chance. She hurled the vial toward the pedestal, where it shattered on contact with the artifact. A blinding light filled the room, and the artifact's pulsing energy began to fade. The Black Hand members gasped in shock, their eyes wide with disbelief. "No," the man cried, his voice filled with fury. "You've ruined everything." Enola stepped back, her face grim. "It's over." The light from the artifact dimmed, its power rendered useless. The Black Hand's plans had been thwarted. But as the man's eyes burned with hatred, Enola knew this wasn't the end. There were always more secrets to uncover, more mysteries to solve. And the Black Hand was not the only shadow lurking in the world. But for now, London was safe. The artifact was destroyed. And the Black Hand had been stopped. As Enola and Mallory made their way back into the streets of London, the city felt quieter, somehow. The fog had lifted, the danger had passed, but Enola knew that her work was far from over. There would always be more mysteries to solve, more dangers to face. But she was ready for them. She was ready to face whatever came next. Because the truth, after all, was always worth the fight. If you've enjoyed the twists, turns, and mysteries of Enola's latest adventure, don't let the journey end here. Stay with Enola as she uncovers even darker secrets and faces new challenges. Keep your curiosity alive, because the next mystery is waiting, and Enola Holmes will be the one to solve it. Don't miss the next chapter, follow the clues, stay tuned, and always be ready for the unexpected.